Hi again, and welcome to the season 4 premiere of Getting Caught Up. To start the 4th season of this podcast, I thought to myself, I need somebody big, a big name, somebody who's really interesting. And there's nobody more interesting than my guest today, my old friend, Dave Rubin. Dave is the host of the Rubin Report. He's a stand-up comedian and 2-time author. He's all over cable news. You've probably seen him there. He's also the founder of the Locals platform, which merged with Rumble in 2021. Dave is a great guy. A lot of people might not know this, but Dave and I met way back in 1999, and along with a couple of other people, created and hosted a small TV show together. We talked about all of that in this episode and took a look at a clip or two. We also discussed Dave's success with creating Locals, some of the challenges he faced along the way, and the successes he's had hosting the Rubin Report over the years. Of course, I also asked Dave about his thoughts on the 2024 presidential race and what he thinks might happen in what is a highly volatile and unpredictable race on both sides of the aisle. Now, as I do with every other guest who has come on this podcast, I offered Dave a rundown. Not exact questions, just a list of what we might discuss. But he said no rundown, just surprise me. So I did surprise him with a few things at the end. Things got a little crazy, even a little bloody. It had Dave saying that of all the interviews he's ever done, this was the weirdest ending to one he's ever experienced. Quick reminder, give this episode a like or a comment to help its visibility so I can keep bringing you interesting people like Dave. Anyway, the night before Dave and I recorded this, we got Chinese food here at the house, and I opened up a fortune cookie and got what I thought was an interesting message. It said, "You achieve great peace of mind when you talk with an old friend." Turned out to be quite a prediction because that's exactly how I felt after talking with Dave. Really enjoyed chatting with him and getting caught up, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. So here he is, straight from Florida, Dave Rubin.
All right.
I feel like, are we going to get in trouble here today?
Let's tell the people about all the things we used to do.
It feels like we might get into a little bit of trouble, but I don't even know if you can get in trouble at this point. Are you immune to trouble?
I am my own boss, so the chances I fire myself, I would say, are slim to none.
I know. You've sort of like, what do they call it? Achieved escape velocity, right? Is that like when you just they can't pull you back. They can't bring you back to punish you.
Or that means you're just like veering off into the vast chasm of the universe, completely space, uncontrolled, with no direction or anything else,
Could be that too. Could be that. Let's start there, Dave. Let's talk about like how you've done what you've done here, because it's really impressive, and I think one of the things that I've been most impressed by is your ability to see around the corner. I'm talking about years ago, right? When you sort of recognized, like, before censorship had become sort of what it was and everything, you sort of realized that the threat that was like beginning to bubble up, and you went ahead and you created Locals, and then, worked hard with that. And I think, that along with YouTube led to the rise of the Rubin Report. And I mean, you saw this coming way before like the Tucker Carlsons and Don Lemons of the world, who were like just felt the impact of that sort of thing. So tell me about that. How did you know so early what was going on?
There was a guy named Andrew Tavani who I used to do some comedy stuff with way back when, who
don't know that guy. Who's that?
Who once said to me, and I quote him every now and again on the Rubin Report, he once said to me, "Dave, we're so ahead of the curve, we're behind it." And I think what you were referring to back then is that the type of comedy we were doing with the anti-show and some of the stand-up that we were doing and stuff like that, which I'm happy to talk about. I'd actually probably prefer to talk about that than just the nitty-gritty politics stuff. We were ahead of the curve, so it was like people couldn't quite exactly get what we were talking about. We were making jokes about Wolf Blitzer and CNN and the ridiculousness of mainstream media and the whole idea of the anti-show, which we should tell people about. Maybe you could throw a clip in here if you've got I've got the mini DVs of it right here. I don't have a digital version of it. I mean, I literally have the mini DVs right here of I think we ended up doing 6 episodes, but we were ahead of the curve in terms of the ideas that we were talking about. They were really focused, for me, and I think for you particularly, focused on the absurdity of mainstream media, which now is like, that's ubiquitous in society. Everyone makes fun of mainstream media. Nobody trusts mainstream media. you're right. Obviously, the rise of what I do, and it's not just me, but Shapiro and Tucker and plenty of other people just doing something counter to that mainstream narrative. Like that's like the thing now. I would say that's kind of the grand battle in America right now is the battle of narratives, and then there's like battles beneath that. Like at the moment, we have a border battle. Beneath that could be what becomes, like everyone's talking about a civil war now, but like just tension between people in societies when you have people who think so many different things and who, not even that they think different things, a healthy society can tolerate that. What a healthy society can't tolerate is people who think that they're allowed to kill other people or silence other people or the rest of it. But I guess I don't know, it was kind of a function of doing stand up the way I did, I started in May of 98 was the first time I ever got on stage as a comedian. And that was like 2 weeks after I had graduated college. I think that was probably around the same month or within 2 months of when you started, right? Like probably around the same exact time.
I started about a year later.
A year later. So, but
Yeah.
we were in like that same crew of people. And the way I did stand up, I couldn't come up with two jokes, but I just had this like notion of like, I don't know, I'm kind of funny. Let me get on stage and see what happens. I'll listen to the show. Most comics didn't listen to the show. They didn't want to watch the show. They would never be in the room when the show was going on. And I always thought that was so odd because there was such a unique opportunity every night to see what was happening. Who could do crowd work? Who could mess with the crowd? Oh, there's a group of really loud black people over there. There's a group of Asian tourists over there. There's a bachelorette party over here. Like there's something funny you can do if you put all these pieces together. So I always thought I was kind of a ringleader in all of that. And anyway, to connect it to your question of like sort of seeing around the corner or being ahead of the curve or whatever, like I just think it was just kind of being aware of what it felt like was happening live in the moment. And it's how I do interviews right now, without really preconceived notions of anything, if I'm on your side of it, or if I'm being interviewed without really thinking about what I'm going to say other than saying it in that moment. So many people that are in this space, it's a controlled version of what they believe, and you can tell it's not really what they believe off camera. Politicians obviously have that problem. But yeah, I think the censorship thing I didn't realize was going to get that bad. I don't think anyone realized it was going to get that bad. And oddly, I guess I got stuck right in the middle of it just by talking about free speech from a liberal perspective. And sadly, the liberals have in large part failed all of us.
Well, that's what I thought too. I mean, obviously you were doing your show, and I get where, obviously I've known you forever. So I understand your ability to do the show you've done and sort of what motivates all that. But just seeing what was coming, so that you created your own infrastructure, your own platform, essentially, which really has worked out because now, I mean, even if you were to get, say, demonetized, and I feel like it has happened on YouTube for maybe a couple of your videos, right? But if you get demonetized, you still have a safety net now. Whereas a few years ago, that could be devastating to somebody.
I'll tell you there were a couple of reasons that led me ultimately going independent and then creating locals and why I did all that stuff, which in retrospect, it was crazy that I decided to start a tech company and all of this. It all worked out. So I'm one for one in that regard. But like that I spent, Connor knows, he was working for me at the fundraising part of that. I was spending when we were trying to raise money for locals, because what I wanted to do was just all I wanted to do originally was create a subscription service for myself so that I could be independent without being on Patreon or being beholden to some of that big tech stuff. I didn't realize that once we decided to scale that up into a real company, so not just for me, but something that we could offer to other creators, I didn't realize that creating a company was going to be like, oh, I got to spend 6 hours every day pitching to people over and over, saying the same exact thing for like 2 years. I mean, there was a good 2-year run at the beginning of Locals where 80% of my day was about fundraising and trying to sell the idea, the miracle of it. In retrospect, like it all worked out, so it was good. But had I known that going in, that was the way my life was going to be in that time, now I look back at it, it was like the good old days in a way, but it was like a crazy amount of work that you just didn't know if it was going to pay off. Again, I'm one for one. It did work, but you just don't know if it's going to work when you do it. And I guess that's what you need as someone that's going to do anything right. You need a little bit of that. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't do it. But anyway, as far as why I did it, I was on Aura TV, which was Larry King's digital network. I had bounced around. Obviously, I was on the Young Turks and some other networks, and I was on Aura TV, and the network wasn't doing that well. They had Larry had his show and a couple other shows, but my show was exploding. And the better my show did, the more the executives were demanding we bring in. The more money they wanted us to bring in, the more views we wanted to get. And meanwhile, everybody else, nobody was watching any of it. And they were just like let off scot-free. Nobody was demanding anyone of anything. They were taking resources. Meanwhile, I'm creating everything and doing well, and they're just demanding more and more. And I remember going into one meeting they had brought in a new CEO, and he busts out a sheet of paper, and he's got all these numbers on it, these projections, and he's telling me the numbers that we're going to have to hit. And I walked out of that meeting and I was like, all right, I'm leaving this place, because it was like, wait a minute, because I produce, you now want to like beat me senseless and in a weird way hold it against me while I'm dragging everybody, but you would never bring in the people that are not producing to demand more out of them. So I'm thankful in that sense that I went through a little bit of a corporate structure to then be like, oh, I don't want anything to do with this. And then again, was kind of crazy enough to think that I could start a tech company that was going to work.
And it's strange that he would come in and single you out like that. Like, you're carrying the whole thing. And why not get the underperforming people, or why not just replace the underperforming people?
Well, it's like when people are not doing that much, especially in a corporate atmosphere, they're always just looking to go to the workhorse, and whoever's, producing anything, can we go back to that stone and get another little drop of oil out of that thing? And it's like, eventually you'll either just wither away and die over there, or you kind of blaze your own path. And the blaze your own path thing, I mean, for many of the things that we did together, starting comedy clubs together, doing the anti-show, just saying we're going to wander into NBC and create our own TV show without asking anybody. And we actually did it. And then it ended up on the front page of the New York Observer, and had the internet been a little more video friendly at the time, because we were on the front end before YouTube came out, we would have blown up the world. I have no doubt we would have what became the Daily Show. I mean, we were better than the Daily Show, actually, and certainly more irreverent. We would have had that, but we were just too ahead of the curve.
Just a slight bit. It was a couple of years, because then YouTube came around. I mean, we were perfect. We were a YouTube show before YouTube existed. Why didn't you create a tech company back then, Dave, so we could
I don't know. Nobody knew we didn't know what the hell we were doing. It's a crazy, crazy story. I've only told it a couple times. I wrote about it, obviously, in my last book, but people really would not believe what we did. I mean, it was
so go ahead, tell a little bit about it. Tell a little bit. This is you're a good storyteller. So
I mean, let's go back to around 1999, and a bunch of ragtag comedians that were doing all sorts of odd jobs in their private lives. We all met each other. It was me, you, Kevin Miller, David Gallis, and then we had a whole bunch of other people, sort of, because a bunch of you guys were NBC pages, so you were in that network of different people that had different skills. And me and you and Kevin were kind of sitting around one day like, all right, well, we should have a show. Why don't we have a TV show? Every idiot has a TV show, and let's get a TV show. And also, we were frustrated with the way the stand-up scene worked, because you had to bring people to get on stage.
Or and bark, it was like on the street,
or bark, and they bark, meaning you stand out in Times Square handing out tickets. But it was like, it had very little to do with who was talented that actually got you on, on the main stage and that sort of thing. And we were just trying to figure out our own thing. And I forget, it was definitely me or you, or maybe me and you at the exact same time, where we came up with the general idea for the anti-show, which was we were going to do like a news talk show, but like kind of reverse and deconstruct the entire thing. And me, you, and Kevin were the hosts of this thing.
3 hosts,
and it was sort of ludicrous. And we had a lot of my old nonsensical 80s G.I. Joe cartoon references, silly things like that. And we had your Dill of the Week, which was whoever you thought was kind of the worst person of the week, which Keith Olbermann ended up doing. We did something called the 60-second debate, where we would all argue for 60 seconds, try to take a very big issue like abortion or whatever, and just try to tie it up in 60 seconds. We did all of this super funny stuff. We had a fake warm-up guy, or we had an actual warm-up guy, but then we had a fake band leader. We did a lot of great stuff. And then we decided, we were like, well, we got to figure out where we're going to shoot this thing. And because a bunch of you guys were pages at NBC, I remember I was the one that said it. I said, wait a minute, isn't there a studio up there with chairs?
It was a fake studio. Yeah, it was a fake studio.
It was literally a fake studio, but it was a functional studio. They just weren't shooting anything in it. And I said, why don't we use that thing? And for the course of a year and a half, or almost 2 years, We shot a bunch of shows where we brought in a warm-up comic. We had a live studio show at NBC. We used the Saturday Night Live green room. We used some of their props. We took letterhead. I don't know. I don't remember if it was you or who. Somebody took NBC letterhead and just wrote out a guest list so that we could get 70 people to show up, and we handed it to a security guard, and they just and we were putting on a show.
And now we're dating ourselves, because that shows you how that was pre 9/11, where you could do a thing like that. You just hand a list, a handwritten list, to the security guard and say, everyone on this list, come on up. And he just sent them right up.
Am I mistaken, or we did do at least one show post 9/11, and then it got much more difficult?
You know, that's right. We did do at least one show post 9/11, but they had not changed security protocols still. I mean, it was like, I think 6 weeks after 9/11 that we did that.
I mean, really think how crazy that. I don't remember what night of the week we shot him on.
Saturday night.
This was a Saturday night?
A Saturday night that SNL was off, because we were right across the hall from Studio 8H, which was Saturday Night Live studio.
There you go. So like, think how crazy that is. The balls that we had, or is that just total like youthful naivete? Like, we hand in on letterhead a list of people. We show up, we've got props, all of this stuff. Like, we just show up with a list, and then the security guard, he's just seeing a letter on NBC letterhead. Okay. And then he was basically our private security guard, just checking off a list for us. We put on a show upstairs, and then we put it on cable access TV because there was no
way to distribute. We were just hoping that we put it on there and it would stand out among all the other weird stuff. Right?
And it did. I mean, people, I would get recognized every now and again. We started getting some fans, cable access. Who the hell knows watching that? And then fans were showing up and coming to the live shows.
So that's the amazing thing. By the end of it, we did have, because initially it was just friends. It was like we all used our friend network, which we didn't even have, it was just email essentially back then. I think we used Evite for the very first show. If you remember, we called it Project X.
Project X, there you go. It was before that was a virus.
Yeah. And so we did Project X. People showed up, it was like an invite, and people showed up and came. But by the end, we had an email address, and we said email for tickets, and people did it. It was actually amazing.
It was crazy that we did that. I think had it, as I said earlier, had the timing been a little bit different with technology, with some of our own personal pressures, because a couple of you guys worked at NBC. So then when the story broke, and it was on the cover of the New York Observer that we were doing this thing there, that was kind of, I mean, we were definitely I don't know if we were breaking a law per se, but we were certainly breaking NBC protocol. And a couple of the guys that worked at NBC weren't too happy about it.
It was a very gray area that we were operating in, Dave.
Now, Commander, you've been very outspoken in your feelings about our new president, George W. Bush. What do you think that him in the White House is going to mean to us?
The beginning of the end of human civilization.
Dad, there's no way a pretzel caused that, okay? No pretzel can knock out a fully grown man. It just doesn't happen, right? What are you talking about, man? Snack foods are dangerous. I was in a coma for a week because of a bad banana finger.
Oh, Dave. Is that where you keep your web supply?
What's this?
Superheroes were known to drop by the show unannounced.
Spider-Man.
Tingles get Spidey senses a little bit too.
Have you developed a drinking problem with all this time off that you've had?
Problem? The only problem is this bottle's dry. Can a Spider-Man get a drink around here? The booze is smelling like mush.
We had a couple talent agents and production companies reach out to us, but we didn't even know how to like show them anything or get any, like, it was a crazy time. But I guess in some respect, to get to your first question, all of that had a little something to do with me being willing to work outside of the system and figure out how to get in the system to some extent.
Yeah. So, I mean, then, it's been in like maybe 2 years or not even 2 years ago, Rumble came along and acquired Locals, right? So now that's pretty amazing. And because Rumble is, if I'm not mistaken, Canadian, initially it was a Canadian company, right? And they caught wind of what you were up to. And essentially, I mean, it was a great deal for you. But I mean, I look now, Dave, I'm seeing pictures on Twitter of they named a boardroom after you in that place.
I've got a boardroom. I've got a boardroom. I didn't know that I was going to have a boardroom, but my name has been laser engraved into the glass. So I guess they can never fire me. Obviously, we merged. Technically, the companies merged. So we merged the way that like Facebook and Instagram merged. They each have their own CEOs. Asaf, my brother-in-law, who is my co-founder of Locals, he's still running Locals. He's the CEO over there now. I don't work for them. I consult a little bit. So I talk, about free speech stuff, and I'm out there promoting, obviously, the platform. There's been some great stuff for Rumble in the last week because we brought on Barstool Sports and Dave Portnoy, and you can just kind of feel everything. Even with this resurgence of Trump, and Rumble runs the infrastructure for Truth Social, you can just sort of feel that, people are excited that there are alternative pipes now. Exactly. if you're taken out on YouTube, it's like you can be on Rumble. You can be on both at the same time. You can be on one or the other, but Rumble is not going to kick you off, basically, as long as you're not breaking the laws of the United States. And that means there's going to be some people that say mean things. There are people that do not like me on there. You're not going to believe it, but they're still allowed to be there.
Sure. And that's really what I was getting at, Dave, is just the prescient nature of seeing that, like, to make those pipes so that there is an alternative there for everybody, really,
Well, I'll tell you one thing that when I was trying to raise funds, and we were even before we were trying to raise funds, when I was just kind of kicking around the idea of, like, can we do this? That was when the whole sort of intellectual dark web thing was blowing up. So, I'm doing these videos that are getting millions of views with Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and the Weinstein brothers, a bunch of people. And I kept saying to everybody, like, we should be building something. We should be building something. And to different combinations of us, tried to take different meetings at CAA and at venture funds and all these things. And it was just, like, impossible to wrangle cats. Jordan was exploding in popularity and had a million things going on. Sam Harris kind of wanted to be a solo guy. He just didn't want to be associated with anybody. Ben was at the beginnings of Daily Wire. Like, it was just really hard to get anyone together. But basically, everywhere I went, everyone kept saying to me, Dave, why don't you build something? Why doesn't anyone build anything? And then when I would go to these meetings and tell people, well, this is what I want to build. I want to build, in essence, a Patreon competitor, but you're going to own the data. We're going to give you a slick app with live streaming capabilities. There's going to be no middleman with you in big tech, no algorithmic manipulation so that, people won't see your videos, all this stuff. Every single meeting I went to, everyone was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And then, of course, what happens is 95% of those people just never call you back. Yeah. I had several meetings. I don't mean this as a shot to him, but I think people would find this interesting. I had, like, probably 6 to 8 meetings with Mark Andreessen and his company. He's one of the biggest tech guys around. And I thought he was kind of nuts. Yeah. I thought he was, like, going to give the rocket fuel for everything. And then they just totally bailed on us. Then we found other people that didn't. David Sachs ended up being the one that really opened up all the doors for us, because when he jumped in, it gave the signal to the rest of the kind of cool crew that they could invest as well.
Yeah, they need somebody to do it first until So why did Andreessen give a reason as to why he didn't want to fund, or he just totally ghosted you guys?
Kind of totally ghosted us. And then I think maybe he went with Substack or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I don't know that it even said that publicly before. And I don't mean it to, like, smack him down or anything. But I think it's interesting. The point is, like, even a guy like Andreessen, who's a legend in this business, you miss some. You absolutely miss some.
Sure.
And the cool thing about David Sachs becoming the guy that ended up really helping us was that I met Sachs at a New Year's party, did not know who he was. A very pretty girl came up to me and was saying hi and saying what a big fan she was and how much she enjoyed what I do and appreciates it and everything. And then she said, this is my husband, David. And I chatted with him for a minute or two, and totally nice guy. And then I walked away. And then a friend of mine came up to me and said, oh, you were just chatting with David Sachs. Are you friends? I didn't even know who he was. And then over a few weeks, I did a little research on him. We connected. And the funny thing about investors, I think good ones, the ones that can kind of see past the horizon, is you don't have to give them all of you don't have to take 20 meetings and all that stuff. We gave him the basic information, like very simple one sheet of what our growth was and some of the numbers. I gave him a good pitch, 5-10 minutes. He called us back the next day and he's like, I'm in for $1 million or whatever it was.
Is that right? So and how'd you pitch him? Like over the phone, over Zoom?
We sent him a doc, and then we had one meeting over Zoom for about 10 minutes. And I think the next day he called us back and said, I'm in. And that's just in contrast with these giant companies that we went to everybody you can think of. I'm not going to drop any other names, but giant VC firms and everything else who I had to have 8 meetings with over 20 hours, and then they just don't call you back.
And did you have to Did you have to prepare like a huge deck, like presentation deck and all that stuff? Or
Asaf did most of that stuff. We went into these offices together, and he would do the nuts and bolts stuff, and I would kind of give more of like the celebrity pitch or just kind of the general idea pitch. But also, something interesting about that is just to show you how much everything has changed, even in the last 6 years, is that when we were doing that 6 years ago, everyone was afraid of the political part. Everybody was like, oh, we just free speech. That means you're a right winger. We're afraid of that. Where now it's become obvious that there are profitable ways to build alternative pipes. Like now everyone wishes they would have done it back then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You spotted that so early. And, it's good that you did. So with all
I think
it's
mostly because we used to, it's from all our talks, having coffee, wandering the Upper West Side, of, trying to figure out the meaning of life. I guess something rattled into my brain.
Yeah. So listen, you got the Rubin Report has been doing great amid all of this, right? And Dave, was it hard for you at all? Because you really are just a creative guy, right? Like, I feel like you never got into this to be like the businessman and to be out there pitching these types of like a tech company type of idea, right? So was it difficult to try to do your thing? Because you got a daily show, like that's a grind in and of itself. And then try to balance that with, being out there doing all these pitching, venture capital.
As I said before, that like year or 2 years, that it was a lot because my brain was just like, there were times where you have these pitch meetings, think about it, you're pitching the same thing over and over. So you're basically having the same conversation over and over, hour after hour after hour, after I've done my show in the morning. So, I have a certain amount of mental bandwidth that goes into that. And then I might have 5 meetings, 5 hours in a row. And sometimes I would forget if I said something already, or if they had already asked me that question because I was thinking back to the meeting before, or just like, I was just exhausted from that. So that's why I said, like, if I had known, now knowing that it succeeded, of course I would have done it again. But had I really realized how insanely difficult and what a time suck and everything it was going to be, I don't know that I would have done it. But that's like the beauty of youthful, and I wasn't even that young. I mean, that's the funny part. I was basically rolling into my early 40s at the time. It's not like I was so young doing it. But you live and learn, and again, it did work out. So,
well, you seem to be aging in reverse. So I don't know. We talked about that before we started recording, but
I've got a girl I see once a month. She rubs some stuff on my face. I don't know.
Well, let's talk more about that later. But the Rubin Report, you got the studio, which is amazing. And this is a brand new studio, essentially. It started at the beginning of your new season in September. You introduced a new studio. Now, this is completely built in your home, correct?
Yeah, this is one of, I guess, maybe my 4th in-home studio now.
Yeah. And I know that I think with your last studio, you had Tucker Carlson in, and he was like blown away by that. He actually takes a minute before you guys got into your interview where he's like, oh my God, I love this. And you were like, oh, not everyone comes in here and appreciates that. And he's like, I'm a TV guy. Of course I appreciate this.
Joining me today is the host of Tucker Carlson Tonight on Fox News, now a New York Times best-selling author with his new book, Ship of Fools. Tucker Carlson, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hey, Dave.
I am glad to have you here, my friend.
I'm glad to be here. I love this.
I don't know that anyone has ever walked in here and been more impressed by the Rubin Report.
Because I work in television, so I know what this is, and it's just the coolest thing I've seen in a long time.
Are you jealous?
Are you joking? Yes, I'm jealous.
You have millions and millions of viewers.
I drive across.
You have a massive staff.
But I don't have the control that you have, which is wonderful.
It was a pretty awesome moment. Believe it or not, that's actually 3 studios ago. Because
that's 3 studios ago. Wow, I can't keep up.
Yeah, no, because things changed so fast. That was my first home studio, which we built in my garage when I lived in Sherman Oaks in Los Angeles. And we walked into this house. It was the first house that we had ever bought. I didn't even look at the rest of the house. I opened the door to the house, and immediately to the right was the door to the garage. I didn't even realize it. I just opened the door. I saw this garage with high ceilings, and I said, we're buying this house. Because I was like, I just knew that was going to be the studio. The rest of the house was really great as well. But like, I just knew that was going to be it. And that moment with Tucker, I mean, right before that moment where we turned the cameras and he opened the door to the garage, I was sitting already waiting for him. He opens the door, and the exact quote that he said, he goes, holy fucking shit. Because he couldn't believe that I had built something that in some respects was even nicer than, I've been to a lot of these studios now.
Yeah.
In some respects, what I built was nicer because it was slimmer and trimmer, and there are better ways to do things than these giant machines with huge budgets than they can do. So that was a really beautiful moment for me. So then I was in that studio. Then halfway through COVID, we moved, and that's where when I launched the Rubin Report as just kind of my direct camera show, less interviews, but kind of me doing my thing. And that was in an office, a pre-existing office in the house. And that was a beautiful studio as well. Then when we moved to Florida, which is now a little over 2 years ago, we just took the backdrop. There was a movie theater in the house here, so a totally soundproofed room. And when we got here, I had already was kind of stretched thin financially, and we needed to start the show quick anyway. So I didn't have time to build anything. So we took a digital image of that old studio, and that's what I used for about a year behind me. It was just, people thought
it was just hanging.
Glenn,
it was just hanging on the wall.
Well, it was a TV behind me, but it was just a digital image of it behind me. And it's funny, we were in Miami for like 2 weeks doing the show, and Glenn Beck called me one day, and he goes, "Dave, how the hell did you build that studio so quick?" And I said, "Well, actually, it's just a photograph behind me." And he just like couldn't believe. So people had no idea.
Yeah.
And then
I had no idea
finally
either. Watching, yeah.
And then finally, over the course of a year, as life settled down here, and obviously we had kids and things were nuts, we finally took a few months to build out properly. So we have a three-car garage, and we took basically 2 bays of it. And I've got my 3 guys that are in studio with me here, and then we've got an editing bay in the back, so another guy's back there. And it's pretty sweet. Like I really think we've built something that might be the most, sort of beautiful functional set in all of the land.
It's great. And I remember maybe it was your first or second episode back in this season when you sort of were giving some you were just like, showing viewers the studio and what it's got. But I noticed too, you post on Twitter every now and then, you'll post some shots of the studio and whatnot. But the other day you posted a shot. Let me see if I can share this actually, so you can just take a look at what I'm looking at. You posted this kind of really wide shot. You see that?
Yeah.
There you go. Great shot, right?
So that's so what we did there. I'll tell you something really kind of cool artistically that you might appreciate. So you see that marble wall that's a little bit behind me there.
Yes. Yeah.
What you're seeing there actually, so that is it's I forget, what do they call it? They call it large format tile, if I'm not mistaken. And what it is, you can just buy them at any tile store, but they're completely not connected. So the marble format that you're seeing on there, they're completely disconnected. So if you were to put 4 of them together, they wouldn't look like they match. We put those 4 together, and then my sister-in-law, who's an incredible artist, who also did the painting that you see behind me there, she then painted on it so that it actually looks like one large marble wall. She designed the entire thing, the LED lights and the entire lighting here and all of that stuff. Yeah.
That's so cool. And so your director just gave us.
My director Connor just sits over there, and I say things, and occasionally he presses a button. It's incredible. You want to press it again? Press it again. Look at this guy, huh?
Look at that.
Getting lunch.
Good shot. So that's a great, that's just overall a great studio. And you've got, how many cameras are in there now? Is that 2 cameras or 3 cameras?
No, now we have 4 total, actually.
Wow.
We really only use 2 for the Rubin Report, the main show, obviously.
Right.
So we use the direct to camera, this one, and then this other one that he can switch to right now, which is right over there. And then we have 2 others for the in-person thing. And we've toyed around with maybe adding 1 or 2 other ones just to, just kind of keep it fresh. A lot of people, when we launched this offset shot where you're seeing the blue in the background, that shot right there, we had never done that before. And we just launched it for this season when we came into the studio. Yeah. And a lot of people were like, "No, we don't like it. It's different." And you just kind of have to train people to oh, there's more ways to see things. It's okay. And and everyone likes what they like.
It's just a little conditioning. You got to condition their behavior,
Yeah.
It's been great to see you, expand the way you have, because I love the little studio you've gotten. As you mentioned, is it back behind you, or is it over to your left somewhere where you have and you have a bunch of sort of Dave Rubin?
Oh yeah. Here, maybe Brock can grab one for me. Here, Brock. Here, I'll grab one of these mini DVs. So I have a whole bunch of them in there. Your name is probably on at least one of these.
I think you sent me a picture, and it showed. I think it was my handwriting that's on there.
Yeah. Let's see.
That's a mini. What is that? Mini digital video, mini
Yeah,
DV.
these are mini. They were called mini DVs. Here, he handed me a couple. Some of these are stand-up, some of these are anti-shows, some of these are just, God only knows what some of these freaking things are. I have one of these things definitely, or at least a few of them, have some of my old stand. Oh, here's anti-show. Here we go. So this is anti-show episode 6. I think this is our last episode.
Oh, that's the last one.
So this is the post 9/11 episode. Here's episode 3, which I think was our favorite episode. I think this was probably the best of all of them.
Yeah.
And
you remember what we did?
I wouldn't even know what to do with these things. But some of those old stand-up tapes back there. You remember I used to do that Transformers joke where I said the N-word.
Yeah.
Remember that joke?
I do.
That's on there.
You got it.
They could take me out.
They can't. I think we established that at the beginning.
Oh, they can't. I can't. Right. And I wasn't being racist. It was just an impression.
Yeah. Talking about your stand-up, you had a lot of good material, actually, like you're talking about right now, but you did often get up there and use none of it. I remember seeing you on numerous occasions. You'd blow like 15 minutes of just crowd work, just being funny, like in the moment. And I mean, I'll tell you, as like somebody else who was off to the side watching that, and other people, I think that a lot of people were a little bit jealous of that, because you had your material, which you knew worked, and those shows you'd have to it was sort of repetitive, almost like your pitch meetings for locals. You get up and you do the same material over and over again. So it was great to see you be able to get up there and actually just totally play off the crowd in any moment.
It was weird.
Not everyone can do that,
No, and I guess, I know now in retrospect that, and I don't mean it to pat myself on the back, but because you said it, I'll reiterate it, that I knew a lot of comics. Go ahead and pat yourself on the back, Dave. Well, I guess a lot of comics were jealous of me. There was definitely because there were guys that were stars ahead of us that I would just blow apart the room, and then they would go up, and I know that they didn't like following me because I was just crushing it in there, and it was such chaos that it was hard to follow, because then they would get up there and be like, what's the deal with shoelaces? And that it just didn't work after. So a lot of guys didn't want to go after me because of that. I wasn't the only guy that did that sort of thing, by the way, at the time. I mean, the two guys that I loved the most, and you were quite a good stand-up yourself, by the way. But the two guys that I worked with the most, because you stopped doing it a little bit earlier. Bob Jurgens, if you remember Bob Jurgens. Of
course.
And who is still the funniest guy I know. I don't think he's doing stand-up anymore, but still in New York City doing the acting thing. And Mike Singer, who you probably... Oh, Mike Singer, who did some stuff with us with the Anti-Show. And the three of us together, we would just kind of... Usually Mike would go first. He would kind of break up the crowd, figure out what's going on. Bob would go first, break up the crowd, figure out what was going on. I'd go in the middle, take all the pieces, just throw them all over the place. And then Mike would go on at the end. So it was Bob, me, then Mike.
Yeah.
And we would just do this insane, it was just this insane, crazy thing. And I guess some comics were kind of jealous, but the sucky part of that is, this without naming names, some of the worst comics that I knew ended up getting on the Tonight Show and becoming stars and everything else. And then some of the best guys become nobodies that you've never heard of. And I just could not do the tight, they were always like, you got to do a tight 5 minutes so that you can get on Comedy Central. And then when you're on Comedy Central, you get on the Tonight Show. And when you get on the Tonight Show, you're going to get on you're going to get your sitcom. I just couldn't do it. If something struck me when I was on stage, I just had to do it. And so to me, it was like juggling, but like not being fully in control of what I was juggling. And there were some nights where it was just absolutely incredible. And some nights I would kind of lose control of it, but it was usually pretty good.
But you still had fun up there, I think. And it was more fun, I think, for you, even though you had great material. You had great prepared jokes that were good.
I know.
Sometimes just leave them on the side, didn't use them, and just,
You used to tell me a lot like, oh, that's a great joke, or kind of get me to try to tweak something here or there. And I was just like, I don't know, maybe I'll tell that joke again.
That's funny. Listen,
you used to have a funny joke about, you did something about how, you were like, I could see, being young and being gay, it seems like it's fun. You're just hanging out with your friends and it's a bunch of guys and you're all having fun. And then you're like, but being old and gay seems weird, because one day you're just sitting on a park bench with the guy's hand on your leg.
And you're like, who is that guy? I'm surprised you remember that much of it. First of all, I can get in trouble, Dave. So
sorry. Not that
I don't think I could tell. I don't think you could tell that joke these days.
Isn't it fun that also because of where we lived? I lived on 83rd in Amsterdam. You were a couple blocks north. and that we lived in Seinfeld country.
Yes.
Like so much of what came out of New York City comedy was related to like that sort of weirdness of what was captured so well in that sitcom. And we lived in the heart. I mean, Jerry lived a block away in real life.
Yeah.
But like the whole show took place right where we were. All of the restaurants, all of the exteriors, those are things that we were walking by every single day. Actually, Jerry did his first stand-up special after the show went off the air at the Beacon Theater, which of course was was about 74th and Broadway. I used to walk by that every single day going to that 72nd Street subway every single day saying, one day I will do stand-up in that room. One day I will do stand-up in that room. And then actually the first show that Jordan and I did when we launched that tour, Jordan Peterson, was at the Beacon Theater. And I crushed it that night. And I guess the rest is history.
And that's amazing. How did it feel to get up on that stage then?
It really was awesome, actually. Like, I don't have that many, I've done so many shows with Jordan and a gajillion other things that I've done, that there's not a lot of things that stand out in my mind. That one at the Beacon stands out. Actually, the last show that I did on the original tour with Jordan was at the Sydney Opera House in Australia, in Sydney, obviously, was absolutely incredible. Few little moments stand out here and there, and the rest, it's like you're just kind of doing what you're supposed to do, so you don't think about it, I guess.
Sure, I can understand that. That must have been sort of extra special though, because that's almost a homecoming. I mean, literally, you used to live about 5 blocks from there. Like you literally, that's like your
5
backyard,
blocks
essentially.
And like I was freaking broke. I had no money. I don't know what I was doing. By the time I had started some of the comedy clubs, which is another thing that I did that was kind of outside of the system. I started I started Joe Franklin's comedy club and another one. And so I was making a little money as a stand-up, which most comics didn't make any money. There was no money to be made. You barked and then you prayed basically to, on the kindness of strangers. But I had a little bit of money at times, but there were times where I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent. My cable was being cut all the time. The electricity would go out in that apartment, but I just figured out ways to survive.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you, Dave, about I think these are some big moments for you. It's when you recently appeared on Bill Maher's Real Time show. Because I know like you've always admired Bill Maher and followed his career closely and that sort of thing. And so I know for a while ago you were on his Club Random podcast, but then to show up on Real Time, that was a great moment, right? For you?
Well, it was interesting because when you and I were doing our thing back in 98, 99, like that was when Politically Correct was still on. You and I actually interned at Politically Incorrect. Wait, were you?
No, we did. I was going to bring that up. We didn't intern. We worked there as PAs.
Sorry. We were PAs. We were PAs for a week or two when they did a bunch of mafia shows in Brooklyn.
2 weeks.
Not interns. Yeah. And we did that.
They were in from California, right? With Politically Incorrect, and they did Mob Week in Brooklyn. That's what they did.
Yeah. And it was Sweeps Week. So they wanted to do these like alternative shows or whatever. And if you remember, I went up to the producer, who's still his EP now, Dean Johnson. And I went up to this guy and I said, hey, I'm a stand-up here and I'd love to do warm-up one of these nights. And he said yes. And then like 2 minutes before, the warm-up guy, whose breath stunk like whiskey, caused a big freaking scene, and then they didn't let me do it. I guess he didn't want to be upstaged or whatever. But what's interesting, but point is, I wanted to be on Politically Incorrect. Like Bill, I always thought he was I agreed with much of his politics, but I thought he was a great host. I always loved the way he threw to commercial. He'd get like a concept in his mind, and then he could wing that into how we were going to break. I just thought it was such a professional way of doing things. And he was funny, obviously, too. Yeah. And I wanted to be on that show forever. And then as the years went by and even as I was getting more popular, it just kind of wasn't happening. And I had met with the bookers a million times and pleaded my case. And I had been backstage a million times and all of that stuff, even to the point where I was there just, 3 months ago when DeSantis was on. And I happened to be there that day. So I talked to the governor a little bit in the green room before about, what I thought Bill might do and what might be effective or whatever in terms of what he was going to say. But I had kind of given up already. Like I also felt, because I got on to Club Random and Bill and I, there was clearly a mutual respect there and everything else. I kind of felt like I just put it to bed. Like I was just kind of like, And then one day, about 2 months ago, I finish up the show and Phoenix is on, gets off the phone. And he's like, come on outside. I got to tell you something. And when he told me, in a weird way, I was like, oh, kind of like, it wasn't that exciting to me. It was just like, oh, now And ironically, then, I went there. Then that was on a Thursday. I got there on Friday, shot that night, and it was great. It was just great. I felt like I did well. Bill clearly liked me, even for what our differences are. We've become friendly outside all this, and there was a mutual respect there again. And I will tell you that in the middle of it, at one point, I full on had one of those like, "Whoa, you did it" moments. Like I really was very aware of that.
Yeah, you should, because that was, first of all, you did do great on the show. It was awesome. I mean, I was texting you, I think, the next day. I can't stay up that late, Dave, so I had to watch it. I'm wondering if you could stay up that late, frankly.
No, thankfully they shoot at like 2:00, so it's okay.
Yeah. But no, you were great. And also, so another thing I wanted to ask you about, they have you on next to James Carville, right?
Yeah.
So you're sitting there next to Carville, and look, politically, I know you guys basically used to be on the same side, right? Of things, going back years, right?
Yeah.
Now I watched Carville and on that appearance, and I'm like, what the hell happened to this guy? It seems like he's completely lost it. Like 30 years ago, Dave, the guy had some wisdom, right? He was the guy who came up with the economy's stupid. And that helped propel Clinton into office and whatnot. Among a bunch
he's been around it forever. Politics kind of makes everybody crazy. He's getting up there in years. I don't know how old he is. I think he might have some physical stuff. So he's very frail off camera. We chatted for a few minutes in the green room, and he was totally nice. But one of the things that he does, which is a little bit of a trick in a way as a TV guy, because his accent, he's got that hardcore Louisiana accent. He talks real fast. He moves a lot. When he's talking like this. I hate that. You kind of don't know what he's doing, and you can't really follow him. It's very hard to follow what he's saying. It's hard to follow him visually, much as I'm not going to win. It's 1964, and I'm going to. And also, he was wearing that crazy pink sweater.
Yeah.
So there were a couple times where he said really zany things that I was having a little bit of trouble, because I also felt like, oh, am I going to just destroy this old guy right now? Where had it been someone that I felt was like a little more of like a contemporary or something. That being said, he brought up the Donald Trump very fine people on both sides thing. And I did lay out the truth, and he kind of squirmed. He literally squirms around it, and then Bill even kind of conceded that I was right about that, which I don't know that had ever happened on that show before.
Yeah, I don't
actually.
Think so.
I know it hasn't happened on that show before.
I don't watch it all the time, but I mean, I don't know if that's happened kind of anywhere, let alone that.
No, mainstream media, mainstream media to really in real time, pun intended, to debunk the Donald Trump very fine people on both sides thing and say, actually, the next sentence was, I do condemn the neo-Nazis. I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. I don't know that had ever been done before. And it was funny because I was thrilled that they gave me the opportunity, that it came up. It wasn't like it was planned. I didn't even know what we were talking about at that moment.
Yeah, it was organic. Dave, I don't know if you saw, I just put up the, here, I'm going to put it back up because I didn't want to interrupt you, but I took this screenshot. It's so funny that you ended up talking about this. You see the
is that the moment? Oh, here,
it's not the exact moment, but it was another moment where he was moving around and doing a lot of like just gyrating around, and you're just looking at him like, what is going on?
Well, you know what it is. It's
I think you were commenting. I think at this point you were commenting on his sweatshirt.
Well, you know what it is. When you watch Joe Biden speeches and he slurs through something, but the audience still applauds. There's certain, it's like a mnemonic device in a way. Like there's certain tricks and rhythms that just people don't know what they're doing. So one of the things that he's doing, and again, this is like he's been in the game forever.
Sure.
So when he's doing all these weird motions and flying all over the place, the audience, I could feel the audience, they don't know what he's saying either, but they're like, oh, look at him. He's doing something good for him.
Right. If they just know they're supposed to laugh at this point or applaud, right? It's like,
I've mentioned it on the show before. My guys have probably heard this, but do you remember when me and you went to the Letterman show?
Absolutely.
And we got yelled at for not applauding enough.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, because it was cold in there, and I was kind of like this, and I
guess
was
freezing, and we had been standing outside. If you remember, we stood out online outside, and it was snowing, so we were freezing going in. And that place is notoriously cold, the Ed Sullivan Theater.
And we were comedians. It's like I can't laugh at every stupid joke.
And do you remember who the guest was that day? who was
Give me a hint. Give
one
me a
guest.
hint.
He had one guest, so that guest got 2 segments, right?
Oh, right, because somebody got snowed out. Who? Give me a hint. Give me a hint.
I'll give you a hint. A former Fox News like top-rated host.
Was it Bill O'Reilly?
It was Bill O'Reilly.
Huh.
So, and the conversation was good, but it wasn't like super hilarious either. You know what I mean? Like it was good conversation, and I think we were enjoying it just fine. But it wasn't like, it wasn't like we were not clapping during a comic who was up there like cracking off jokes.
Well, I remember actually my main memory of that is first when we were kind of yelled at by the PA for not applauding, and they've got a sign that says applause, and they're showing you to applaud.
Yeah.
You're just seals. They're throwing little fish at
Exactly.
you. But my main memory of that is that Letterman did virtually nothing with the crowd beforehand or during break. He was very kind of serious and not interested in the crowd. And I remember thinking like, oh man, if I was doing that, like I would be loving every second of it to be out there with those people and everything else. And I don't mean that as a judgment to him. He had whatever his system was to make him be his best. But it's interesting how everybody operates a little bit differently. When I do Gutfeld comes out, says some silly things to the crowd. Jon Stewart, when I was an intern at The Daily Show back in '99, he really didn't do that at all, more like Letterman.
Really?
You just never know how people operate.
Well, I worked at Conan for a while, and Conan had a warm-up guy, but Conan would come out and do like a good 5 minutes every night of himself interacting with the audience, just crowd work, essentially.
Yeah.
He did it every night.
I think people appreciate that. And I know, the one thing that I miss in my career right now, which who knows what the future will hold, is I don't have a studio audience. I got 3 guys that I pay to laugh at me. But, you see what he did there?
Right on cue. Do you have a laugh sign? Did somebody push the laugh?
No. They know they have to laugh 7 times per show.
They know when to laugh. That's fun. Yeah. So listen, let's take a look at a clip of you on there. Can we take a look at a clip of you on real time? I'm gonna play it.
Yes, if HBO will allow it, I'll allow it.
Yeah, well, I don't play by all the rules here.
Wilders. I remember interviewing him for Religulous way back in 2007. A warning to the liberals in America that they need to take our immigration crisis more seriously. So if you don't follow the story, Geert Wilders, he'd been running forever in Holland. Of course, the New York Times calls him a far rightist. They call all these people, Maloney in Italy is another one. Viktor Orban is kind of a far rightist in Hungary. But I think some of them are just, Brexit in England was part of this. People are feeling they are not welcome almost in their own home because of the kind of immigration that these people are fighting against. So
most of these people are not far right by any way that we would think of far right, in that they're racist. I actually met with Orban in Budapest, and I talked to him for a little while, and all he kept saying was, I love Hungary. That's all. I love my people. I love my country. That's it. I don't know what accent that was, but that basically.
That's a dead-on impression of him.
Something.
Can you do his walk?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a waddle. But all of these guys, Geert Wilders, he wants Holland to be for the Dutch, right? Like that's what he wants.
Racist.
When we see that's racist, that's what they would tell you, right? No. Wait, you meant that literally? Or
No. I don't know what we're talking about, but I was just going to say, Dutch for the Dutch. I would amend that if it was me. Dutch values.
No, Dutch values.
You don't have to be actually Dutch. You don't have to be white. That's what I think is great about America. It's the idea. As long as you subscribe to our ideas, which again, to your point and what I was saying at the end of the show, that we're not a Christian nation. That's not what it is. This is a country where we have the First Amendment. Then everybody should be welcome.
No, of course, it's not about skin color, but it is about culture. So what happens is all of these people, whether they're in France or Belgium or any of the countries that you just mentioned, they're realizing, wow, we've got literally millions of people in our borders that are chanting for genocide and gas the Jews and the rest of it. And by the way, it doesn't stop with the Jews, right? I mean, they were at the Christmas tree in Times Square yesterday or 2 days ago. So people are realizing that, and they're looking for anybody, and for some reason they always come with crazy hair, that will fix some of this stuff.
So I thought you and Bill had very good rapport in that. Were you getting that sense too, Dave?
Yeah, well, I think having done Club Random first definitely helped, because when we did Club Random, I had never met him before. Well, no, I had met him, I think, 2 or 3 times at parties in LA over the years for like literal brief hellos, like, Bill, I'm a fan, like that kind of thing. So I had never met him in any concrete way. So we do Club Random. And if you remember, it was the night before I was going to ring the bell for Rumble at NASDAQ, which obviously was an incredible moment. I did not want to get drunk, and I definitely did not want to get stoned on camera. And I was taking a red eye, and it was a big day ahead of me.
Cross country, yeah.
Fly cross country, all that. I end up, drinking he's got my Clase Azul tequila, so I'm having a bunch of that. And then we had such a good rapport. Especially, if you watch the Club Random thing, the first 20 minutes, you can see we're trying to feel each other out. Like, I couldn't tell, is he bringing me on here to like take me out because he thinks I'm like the new version of him? And I think he kind of thought, oh, is this guy like the hot shot version of me or something like that? But after about 20 minutes, we fully break, and then it's just great. So I think clearly what was going on in real time was there absolutely was a mutual respect there. And I think, more than anything else, this, like when you're doing comedy or you're doing some version of what we do, like when you're with someone that they know what they're doing and they're good at it, it's like a pleasure to be around them. I am never, when I do something with Megyn Kelly is a great example of this. Like, I love doing shows with her because she's a pro, she's fun. I can interrupt a little bit, or she can interrupt me. There's a mutual respect and like a play there. And I think we fully got that with Bill. And also, what's interesting about that clip in particular is that he's basically agreeing with me, and that should be the sane liberal position.
Yeah.
The same, but it's not the position of the party, unfortunately, that he supports.
Not currently, but Dave, that was once just basic liberal, like dogma almost, like.
Dude, not only was it basic liberal dogma, go watch Bill Maher's special, the special that he did after 9/11 on HBO. And that's exactly what he's saying. It's all about culture, culture, culture. Yeah. So he always says, I haven't changed my opinions. And it's like, you're right, you haven't. But your party has gone bananas, which is why he gets way more hate from the left than he gets from the right these days.
Yeah, it's crazy that he even gets that. But I thought, in that clip that I showed, I thought he looked just a little like trepidatious about what he was going to say there. Did you sense that too, or?
Yes, because what he doesn't want, I actually don't mean this as a judgment call on him, but what he doesn't want is sort of to be thought of as that he supports someone like Geert Wilders. But the thing is, in a weird way, someone like him should be the biggest supporter of Geert Wilders because in Holland, they have a massive problem with Muslim immigration. That's just true. And it's not because of the color of the skin, as we illustrated there. It's because of the set of beliefs that these people have. So when you say that Holland should be for the Dutch, it's like, that doesn't mean that every single Dutch person has to be white. What it does mean is that they have to share what the values of Holland are. They've imported a bunch of people who do not share that. And of course, that doesn't mean that every Muslim person there doesn't share Dutch values. But in large part, what has happened, this is in Sweden, this is in Germany, it's in all these countries, and God knows what's going on in the United States right now with 6 million people in 3 years. But I think what happens to him as a good liberal is he doesn't want to be like, oh, shut the border down, get rid of these people, I'm as mean as Geert Wilders, but I'll also be sane. And I think that's what's happened to that's why the sane liberal is like basically the dodo bird at this point, because their ideas are right, but their solutions or the people they support are all wrong. And then you're pretty lonely at the end.
Yeah. Hey, I know we're getting super late on time here.
Yeah.
You got a couple minutes to talk about the presidential race? I feel like I got Dave Rubin here.
You got 5 more minutes, Tavani.
We got to talk presidential race. All right. DeSantis, I know you were in his corner. Were you surprised that he dropped out when he did? I was surprised. I think I texted you that. I was like, he's out already? What?
Yeah, I thought he would go to South Carolina, but I didn't even realize actually until a few days ago that South Carolina is not for another month from now. Did you know that? So we get Iowa, and then we get New Hampshire a couple days later. We have Nevada like in a week from now, but Nevada's very small, and that's Trump country. I thought he would at least run it to South Carolina just to see, but I think basically what happened was, in light of the trials, in light of all of the drama around Trump, he just sees the energy there. He just sees the energy there. And if he made one mistake this entire time, and I had a phone call with him a couple of days ago, and I sort of said this, it's not even a mistake. Nobody knew how to deal with Trump. Nobody knows how to deal with Trump now. So the fact that he has come home early, and especially in light of what's going on with immigration right now and this Supreme Court fight in Texas versus the Biden administration, that DeSantis is now on the front end of that as well. and that Florida can hopefully blueprint that across the country. I'm very happy that he's the governor here. The United States as a country might be terminal right now. It might have a terminal case of something. I don't think the states do. And that's a depressing reality to some extent. I'm not saying I'm totally right about it, but if that's the case, I want the best guy to be in the state that I live in. And that's what I've got now.
I mean, it seems like a win for Florida,
And Florida does have a way of racking up wins. So if that really, all of my neighbors, my neighbors all know me at this point, and everybody, oh man, DeSantis, we were pulling for him. But everybody then says the same thing. Well, he's back here. We're all good. Yeah. It's all good here.
Let me ask you this. Do you think there's any chance he'd end up being Trump's running mate?
I don't think so. First off, I think there might be some constitutional issue with two guys from Florida. I'm never fully clear if that's actually right.
Yeah, I've heard
related
that,
to when, because I don't even know what Trump's full residence is and some stuff around that.
Right.
To me, if you're DeSantis, it's like you keep strengthening Florida. Clearly, states' rights are going to be more and more important, and you can lead the country without even being president to an extent. So if Trump has to go through the gauntlet right now, and let's say Trump gets in and things start getting marginally better, but then Florida continues to flourish. In a lot of respects, all of the goodness will follow him. So I don't even know that he wants, everyone's like, he'll run again in 28. I don't know. He'll be able to do an awful lot of things. The guy is an incredibly efficient leader, and all sorts of companies want an incredibly efficient leader. And, he's put in public service. The guy, it's not like he's got a lot of money or anything else, but he's got a lot of respect from good people, and that has value.
Yeah. And he's young, I mean, what is he, about 40?
He's younger than us.
He's younger
45.
than us. 45. Yeah. Wow. All right. Let me ask you about somebody who's even younger. How about Vivek Ramaswamy? What do you think of him? I know you guys had like some beef for a while back, but I also thought you guys were like friendly too.
Look, we're kind of friendly. I knew him obviously before he was running for president. My disappointment with him was that it was fairly obvious to me from early on that he was running as a campaign surrogate for Trump, and that he was sort of running like he was going for Celebrity Apprentice. And that's very obviously the truth. I don't know that they fully coordinated it and had a document that they signed or anything else. But what I didn't like was that every day he was going after DeSantis, usually, in my opinion, in a dishonest way, claiming that he lost to Disney, which was completely not true, claiming that DeSantis had signed some laws that were infringing on the First Amendment, which also isn't true because they're not on the way to the Supreme Court. They were property rights laws. That's a whole other story. But I felt like he was aiming all his fire in one way and in no way towards Trump, who, if you want to be president, if you're running for president, you go after the number one guy, not the guy that you claim is never going to win. So I think I just kind of exposed that a little bit early. I think most thinking people realize it's true now. I mean, he drops out after doing, actually for him, fairly decently in Iowa, and then immediately is on stage with Donald Trump, basically blowing him. So I think people kind of see what it is. But that's not to say he's a skilled orator. I don't think he's evil or anything like that. I know there's a lot of conspiracies related to him and Soros and whatever. I think he's got a bright future, but that's just what makes politics so frustrating, right? Like, if you look at all of the Trump surrogates who now think Ron DeSantis is the most evil person ever, every single one of them have 1,000 tweets saying Ron DeSantis is the best ever. So politics makes everyone kind of crazy. I'd like to believe that I'm on the slightly less crazy scale of what politics can do to people.
Absolutely. And also, every time there's an election, right, you go through this election cycle, everybody fights dirty. And then as soon as it's all over, they're all friends again. I've seen it. We've seen enough of these at this point to know.
Well, because politics, because it's a show. It's like the show must go on. There's no other no other job could you have where you could behave like this. You can't, you know what I mean? Like, nobody else could have a job at any company or in any industry where you could do any of the dishonest lies and keep working your way up. But that's what politics is.
It's funny. All right. So let me ask you this, though. Do you think Ramaswamy will end up as Trump's running mate?
No, because Trump needs to expand the pool now. Vivek's support it's all MAGA people. They all love him, and rightfully so. He operated as a surrogate, and he is a surrogate, and that's it. If you're Trump, I think there's a way greater chance he would choose Haley than he would choose.
That's what I was going to ask you next. Yeah.
It may not be Haley, but you have to widen the pool. The guy whose name has been kicked around a little bit, who I was talking about 2-3 weeks ago, is Lee Zeldin in New York. Because first off, you get a New York guy who's kind of a rising Republican, who's a nice man. If you've watched some videos of him, even with his kids, like he's just a nice man. And Trump could use a little bit of nice man thing. Somebody who's been loyal to Trump also, which is obviously what Trump holds highest in all of these things. But you have to expand the pool. You have to be able to get the 45-year-old woman who hates Trump, but also realizes that we have an immigration problem and doesn't want to vote for a guy with dementia. You got to get somebody a little nicer that's going to widen the pool. So I don't think it'd be Vivek. I could see Vivek being press secretary. Like, could he get up there and fight the media every day? Oh, yeah.
He's going to end up with some sort of job in the administration.
Yeah.
The thing, Dave, picking like Zeldin, or I've heard Elise Stefanik too, her name tossed around. Strategically, is that really worth it? Do you get any extra votes out of that? Like, New York is not voting for Trump, right? So, like,
well, it's not about New York. It's not. The two of them happen to be from New York. It's not about New York. New York is not going to vote for Trump. Obviously, it's about getting who are the crossover people still in this world, right? Like, who possibly could? Well, you know who could? As I always say on the show, the disaffected liberal is the group of people that could move. By the way, that shows why RFK, who you've talked to, it shows why he's still driving numbers right now, even though the mainstream's not talking about him anymore. It's because the people that like him are disaffected liberals. So they're like, oh, the Democrats are bananas. We hate identity politics. We actually want a border. Now, RFK, I like him very much. I've interviewed him and done an event with him. We're trying to do something next time he's in Miami. He's most likely not going to be president. But you want to then take the people who would potentially vote for him, but at the last minute be like, the system is what it is. It's Republican versus Democrat. They need something to soften Trump. That's the thing. It's women, it's suburban women in particular. They are ready to leave the Democrat Party, especially after October 7th. Like it really unearthed the evils of identity politics. I think the protests and the disgustingness of all of that and the Harvard stuff. So there are these decent people that are just kind of decent apolitical liberals, but they just always default voted Democrat, who just can't vote Trump. So if you are Trump, you've got to offer them some crumb to be like, all right, maybe Tulsi. I don't know that Tulsi would do it, but that could be something.
You've talked to her a lot. You know her some, right?
Yeah, I do know her. We're friends. I don't know that she would do that, but I do know that she loves this country, and I know that she wants to make the country as great as it could possibly be.
And she's an interesting person. I mean, she's
former Dem,
a vet, a former Dem, a former presidential candidate herself. I mean, she's obviously got some ambition there.
Oh yeah.
And then, God, if he brought her in, and he wins, then she's looking at a possible run 4 years from now,
Well, she's I think around 45 too, maybe even a little bit younger.
Yeah.
So it's like now you get 8 years out of her, and she's a great communicator. She the Democrat Party treated her like absolute garbage. She can't stand Hillary and all that stuff, and she's just a nice human being. So who knows?
You brought up, and I meant to bring it up. I meant to follow up on it when you brought it up, but the conversation just went in a different direction. You talked about that people like just clapping when they're told to clap, or knowing when they're supposed to clap. You had a great clip on the other day. I'll throw it in here. We don't have to watch it right this second, but it was Biden giving that speech where he just went into some gibberish, and then you threw on a very funny clip. I'll play it right now. Here it is.
We'll teach Donald Trump a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
So funny, right? Like, so who is that? You coming up with that? Do you just say like,
I saw it on Twitter, the original, obviously, right. And then that immediately made me think of the Jim Carrey thing from Liar Liar, which to me is Jim Carrey's best movie. I text Brock. I don't know what he does. I guess he does it on a computer.
He puts it together. Yeah, that's funny. I'll tell you what, my wife, Kathleen, Kathleen,
I do. Same wife. You still got the same wife after all these years? Look at you.
We both got a kick out of that one. She was
good.
She was laughing at that too.
Well, she's a lawyer, so she would enjoy that type of courtroom comedy.
Exactly. Okay, so I know you got to go. Can I surprise you with a little thing here? You agreed to go with no rundown, which I said you're a wild man for doing that. Usually I make a rundown. All right. So I'm going with something that you put up in your first episode back this season. All right.
Uh-oh. Oh.
Terminator Eye.
Oh man, look at that thing. I just got a facial. I like to come back after August nice and refreshed. I don't know what the girl does, creams and late. I don't know what the hell they're doing. You sit there for like an hour. And when I left, there was something, my eye was irritated. I opened up the door and the sunlight was just killing me, but I was just like, oh, my eye must be a little irritated or whatever. Anyway, barely could drive home, get home, and it was the most pain I've ever been in as an adult. Like basically every 10 seconds, it felt like a fish hook was in my eye and somebody was just freaking yanking it.
Really?
It was insane. I go to emergency care. That's where that picture was taken. They put some dye in your eye so they can see what's what. And if you put the picture back, what people can see on my pupil there is that is a chemical burn that was all over my pupil. And because of the size of that,
what's the chemical burn part? Which part of it? Like where I'm going with
what you're seeing on my, that right there in the middle of my pupil, that whole thing there, it was a chemical burn because whatever chemical must have got on my eye. And then I laid there for like an hour and it was just like eating away at it. Anyway, it was unbearable. I ended up going to the emergency eye care center here in Miami, which supposedly we have the best in the entire country. I can tell you it wasn't that impressive. But anyway, a couple. What's the pain medication people that Brett Favre got hooked on? A couple Percocet or something.
Percocets, yeah.
A little Percocet and some weed. 10 hours later, I was all right.
So is that right? Now the whole time, like let's say when they've got the green stuff and everything going on, when you got Terminator eye, are you able to see at that point? Or are you blinded?
I basically could not keep my eye open for a day, for like even 2 days. So it was like, if I opened it, it was extremely blurry, but I could open it for a split second. But then, when I got to the emergency room, they force your eye open like you're in Blade Runner.
It's like a Clockwork Orange. You ever see it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like Clockwork Orange. And they've got this like diamond that's like shooting lasers in your eye. And that was even more painful than the other thing. But I survived. Right.
But then that ended after that. Here, let me go one more thing here, Dave. So you ended up going, you went eye patch. I saw you put this in there too.
yeah. That was my Dan Crenshaw impression. I should have been Crenshaw for Halloween.
For Halloween, yeah. So how was it? How long did you have to wear the eye patch for?
No, so I wore it for like a week. It was mostly light related.
Really?
The light was very, very irritating. And that week was when we were finishing building out the studio here. And it's Florida, it's bright all the time. And I had to walk. I couldn't walk through the house. So I was walking in and out. So all day long, just kind of doing one of these. All
that Seinfeld talk earlier reminded me of, you remember that clip from Seinfeld when Kramer starts wearing the eye patch and says he wants to be a pirate? Here, let's watch it. You remember that?
Hey, buddy. Hey, look at you. What's this? It's an eye patch. You look like a pirate. I want to be a pirate. This is Gary. How you doing? All right. Well, I tell you, there's only one problem. Can't see on your right side? No, it's itchy.
Right. But look, where do I have them? Oh, wait.
So the eye patch made it easier to just keep the light out of your eyes, what you're saying.
Oh, I thought I had my fake newsman glasses, but I don't have them.
I've seen you put those on. They look good on you, Dave.
Wait.
Listen, you find them?
I can't find them. I shouldn't move that much. I just disconnected my microphone. See, that never happens on Fox. They don't let me move.
Since I showed some pictures of you, let me show. I feel like it's only fair if we do it to me. So I'm gonna shock you again, maybe. All right.
Uh-oh.
Are you okay with blood? You okay with a little blood?
Oh, I thought you were gonna show us as kids when we were just.
No, I don't. Kids. Dave, I don't have any of that digitized. I gotta get some. I don't think I have a picture of us as kids. Yeah. Matter of fact.
Oh.
Here we go. This is what happened to me a couple years ago. I had a similar thing. That's in the emergency room.
Huh? What happened?
So that, Dave, is I took a baseball to the face, right? So I was coaching baseball. My son is at the plate. He's a lefty, right? And you're going to find out about this because you got two young boys. They're young now, but in a couple of years, you're going to be coaching them. And there's an app called Game Changer, right? In Game Changer, you like score the game on the app. So I was looking down at the app. I was also standing in just the wrong place, Dave. Notice it's the left side of my face where that happened. So I was standing with the pole. I was just outside of the pole from the fence, right? The end of the fence. Foul ball, never saw it coming. Smashed me in the face, right?
Wow. Was it your son? Was it your son that hit it?
It was my son that hit it. Yeah.
Wow.
The kid was throwing hard. It was a hard throwing righty on the mound. My son's a lefty. I'm on the third base side. Boom, right into me. Here, I'll show you one more. So it went all the way through. So take a look at that.
Is that because your tooth went through?
That's what the plastic surgeon.
Wow.
That's what he theorized. He's like, I think that the flesh smashed into your tooth and your tooth cut it. He's like, the outside obviously was done by the seams from the baseball. He's like, the inside, but it was all the way through, right? So he was putting his finger right through there. And
I have to say, Andrew, I've done thousands and thousands of interviews over my time. This is the strangest ending to any of them.
Well, who said we were done here, Dave? No, we can wrap it up. I know you got to go, but this is
we could spend. We're of a certain age where we could just spend the next half hour talking about our ailments. But
that's what I thought. We talked about your sort of aging in reverse and everything, but I was like, we're getting old. I know you got a torn ACL. We'll talk about that next time.
All right. We'll talk about anytime, my friend. Anytime,
Dave. We've got other things too we got to talk about, but we'll do it again. This was fun though. It was good time chatting with you.
Glad you're still in the game.
Thanks, Dave.